Your thoughts now on a jury that's, I guess now 11 hours into its deliberation on what, many of us thought would probably, if it were going to go for Kyle, be a quick turnaround.
Yes, well, as I mentioned yesterday, we found ourselves deep into the second day of deliberations. It's not a great sign for the defense. But of course, the whole deliberation process now is looking more and more like just a hot mess. I'm sure you know. In fact, I heard Counselor Barnes on your show just a few minutes ago talking about the request from the jurors now to look at some of the videos as exhibits of evidence in the case. Mm-hmm. And of course, the defense is particularly concerned about this whole drone video issue, where they were given a much lower 1/16th resolution version of this critically important drone video than what the prosecution ended up showing the jury. And this is the key to the prosecution's narrative of guilt here, this notion that Kyle provoked the attack of Rosenbaum, and that triggered everything else that happened. And the only evidence they have for this provocation is this drone video that they effectively did not provide to the defense in anything like the resolution that the jury was ultimately going to see.
And explain that. So what was the time difference between the moment Kyle allegedly pulled a gun on Ziminski and I guess Rosenbaum not far away, and when Ziminski and Rosenbaum started to chase Kyle Rittenhouse?
So Ziminski never chased him. Ziminski stayed where he was by those four cars where Rosenbaum was in apparent ambush position. But it's within a second or so of when Kyle was supposed to have pointed the rifle and when Rosenbaum was provoked. And of course, a key issue here is when the defense is given a low resolution version and they look at it themselves before they have their witness, Kyle, their client, testify, they're looking at that low resolution version and they're like, well, we don't really have to worry about this because you can't see anything. There's, it's completely unclear. It's not going to be compelling to the jury. We don't need to spend a lot of time addressing this. When you then discover that what the jury is actually going to see is something that's 16 times higher resolution, well, you might have prepared your client to testify in a different way, not to lie, but to emphasize different things about the experience than was actually the case. And the defense didn't know this higher resolution version existed until after the evidence had closed. So they simply did not have a chance, an opportunity to adequately prepare their client to provide his testimony.
Have you seen the enhanced video? I confess I didn't pay that close attention in the closings to see if the video and the screen grab looked way better than what we had seen earlier.
You know, I do have a copy of the high resolution version, and I can't see anything definite out of it. We know we have footage of the judge in the courtroom spending some 30 minutes reviewing these few seconds of video over and over and over again, looking for what the prosecution claimed is obvious to see, and he couldn't see it. I certainly can't see it. I don't expect the jury can see it. But again, as we talked about yesterday, what we're concerned about here is, having one interested juror who's just looking for an excuse, any excuse, a thin reed of an excuse not to vote for acquittal. Then you have a hung jury, and Prosecutor Binger gets to do this all over again to Kyle Rittenhouse.
I'm sure we're showing the high resolution video as you speak, Andrew, just FYI, of the confrontation. Without circling the participants and so on, it doesn't make much sense, but it does look actually like better quality than what we had been looking at. I want to tell you that the jury has sent out another note. Tell our audience that. We don't know what the note reads, how it reads, what they're asking. And the judge has apparently made a comment, Andrew, on the media and his dissatisfaction with them, and saying this may be the last case he ever presides over in which he allows cameras in the courthouse, in the courtroom. And I'm sure he's getting a taste of what we live every day, which is total distortion by the media and utter unfairness to anyone they perceive as not on their side, whatever their side is. It tends to be left-leaning, and certainly in a case of self-defense. And, if you're a white kid like Kyle Rittenhouse and a man, forget it. And he pointed out, I guess, one of the things that was irritating him was the way the media was criticizing his jury, the final jury selection process. They had the sort of greater pool, the greater, group, and then he had to get rid of 6 and get it down to 12. And I guess he let Kyle Rittenhouse pick just random numbers out of a bag, and that's how we got rid of the 6. And this is something the judge has done for a long time, but the media tries to make a big deal out of it, like this is absurd, the judge is an idiot, and so on.
Well, unfortunately, the judge's proposed solution moving forward for future cases to not have cameras in the courtroom would just make things worse, because then the only insight we would have into what's happening in the courtroom comes from the media that he claims is causing the problem here, misreporting on what's going on, mischaracterizing what's going on in the courtroom. So I certainly don't think that not having cameras there is in any way a solution to the problem he perceives, which is suddenly finding himself exposed to a level of scrutiny that apparently he's never experienced before.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk for a minute about Jacob Blake? Because you are an expert on self-defense. And that's one of the reasons that you're interested in the Kyle case. But also the Jacob Blake case is directly related. I mean, it's actually related in what happened 2 days before the Kyle case. But people don't seem to understand that in the case of Joseph Rosenbaum, he fired 4 times. In the case of Jacob Blake, the police officer fired 7 times. And this hangs up a lot of people. A lot of moms I know will say, that's too many. That's, he could have shot the one time and incapacitated him. If the other guy doesn't have a gun, like, why did Jacob Blake have to get shot 7 times? And why did Rosenbaum have to take 4 bullets? And you help us understand why the law doesn't immediately condemn that.
Well, the law says you can use as much force as you need to use to neutralize the threat. Jacob Blake was within feet of the officer. He had a knife, a very large, sharp knife in his hand. He could easily have turned and slashed that officer with the knife and caused a fatal or serious bodily injury wound to the officer. He had to be neutralized immediately. He was getting into a car with children in it. He'd been known to drive this poor woman's car, whose it wasn't his own car, and crash it deliberately. So the police were concerned about all of this, including the potential for a deadly force attack by him. He was non-compliant with lawful arrest by the officers, again, armed with a knife in his hand. I noticed when the New York Times covers this Jacob Blake story, they show the little video clips of the event, and they always edit out the portions where you can actually clearly see the knife in Jacob Blake's hand. That's why people are upset about that event, because they think literally an unarmed man was just shot in the back 7 times by police for no good reason. That's not what actually happened, but because that's how the media reports it, well, people only know what they see, what is reported to them. So they believe that false narrative. And of course, they're outraged. Anybody would be outraged if that was the truth. And Kenosha burns to the ground because of the way the media falsely reported the event.